LSU fans can't wait to get back inside Tiger Stadium. They'll be in there today as we welcome you to Death Valley for the 2021 LSU spring game. And we'll get a great opportunity to look at the offensive line, look at the starting offense against the starting defense, Tom. Outside of the quarterbacks, is there anything that we should keep an eye on throughout the afternoon?
Well, you just heard Larissa talk about the offensive line. Intact, it's a great area to start if you want to have success in the game of football, but it's the skill guys. They have a lot of fresh faces around the quarterbacks, around the offensive line at wide receiver that they've got to identify.
And we mentioned the quarterback battle. Coach O made it very clear there is no starter, there is no front runner, but one of these four guys has to take the first snap of the game, and they give it to Max Johnson. Ed Orgeron telling us yesterday, Max Johnson getting that opportunity just because of the way he ended last season. Beats Florida in the swamp as a major underdog. Sets the freshman passing record in their final game against Ole Miss. Handing off to the starting bell cow, Tyron Davis-Price. Don't expect to see a lot of running the football today, Tom. Only one healthy running back, and that's Tyron Davis-Price there for the Tigers.
Yeah, we'll see no John Emery, who they're also very excited about. Trey Bradford also out. So far, we've seen 2 snaps of this offense, both out of the shotgun. And you referenced Max Johnson getting the start for no other reason than he played well in his final 2 starts of the 2020 season. But the one thing you do have to note is how efficient he was and protective he was of the football. 8 touchdowns to just 1 turnover for the true freshman a year ago against Ole Miss, and, of course, the upset win on the road versus Florida.
First team defense trying to get off the field on a 3rd and 5. Johnson surveys the field, finds his top option. That's Kayshon Boutte. Those two connected for 308 yards and 3 touchdowns in that final game against Ole Miss.
Look at Max Johnson's poise. Works through his progression, starts to his left, works back, finds Boutte, who's really the only established guy. He's an electrifying player, great with the ball in his hands in space. But who are going to be the supplemental parts of this receiving core? They're still working through that, and they're going to have some true drive concept. Then you have what they call levels, where they're going to layer somebody at different levels of the field, and that was really what you call an over or an orbit route. And Max Johnson doing a great job of identifying it under duress, getting it out late, and then Boutte doing what he does best, and that's making plays after the catch.
Now, there was a flag down, but it was thrown on a block. So LSU not back to the original line of scrimmage, still in enemy territory at the 30-yard line. Play action right back to Boutte. That's now 3 straight passes to the number 1 target, number 1, Kayshon Boutte. So, Tom, we identified it perfectly. Who's the second option for LSU in the wide receiver court? Maybe it's nobody. Maybe it's Boutte all the time.
Well, I think, Jontre Kirkland, Devontae Lee, Trey Palmer's another one that's shown flashes. But look for number 6, Deion Smith. He's had a great spring practice. He's made some really acrobatic catches. Ed Orgeron and Jake Peetz, the new offensive coordinator, raved about his production, particularly when contested. So sooner or later, Max Johnson and the rest of these Tiger quarterbacks are going to have to find somebody outside of number 1 to throw the ball to.
Great pocket from the first team offensive line. This time throwing away from Kayshon Boutte. Take a look at the numbers he produced. This is quickly becoming wide receiver U. Jamar Chase expected to go in the top 10 of the NFL draft next week. He's trying to follow in those footsteps.
Yeah, and listen, this guy, they know who he is. He's established. They know what they're getting from him. And that's what spring football is all about, is you got to find out who the next man up is going to be. Who's the next target? Who's the reliable guy that your quarterbacks trust and can get in sync with? And that, we've had 14 practices. The spring game's the 15th one. I think LSU still has some identifying to do in that regard.
A flag in the secondary. Coy Moore, the intended target. This is a Tiger secondary. Let's talk some defense. And Ed Orgeron told us yesterday, Tom, he was furious with the way his defense looked a year ago, particularly those defensive backs continually giving up the big play.
The bottom line is, it was a bad football team on defense. And Coach O and their players admit that they were confused. They did not understand what was being asked of them. They did not play smart football because I think they were having to think instead of playing fast. In the first 5 games of the 2020 season, now this is staggering, LSU on defense with their athletes gave up 60 explosive plays in 5 games. That's 12 explosive plays of 12 to 15 yards or more per game for 5 straight weeks. You just can't live and be successful doing that on defense.
In the red zone for the first time today, Johnson tucks and runs himself. Yeah, the LSU defense allowed nearly 500 yards a game, most of that through the air. And now they bring in Durante Jones, the new defensive coordinator, comes from the NFL. He coached the secondary under Mike Zimmer for Minnesota last year.
Yeah, listen, you see those numbers right there. I mean, they're staggering. I mean, we've become so accustomed to seeing dominant players and dominant performances on defense. And, you know, we got a play coming up here, and you look at this offense that we're seeing now. You know what? It looks an awful lot like 2019. Defensively, in terms of what they're going to be, looking an awful lot like 2019. Well, why is that? I think Ed Orgeron, he went out in this offseason, and he's trying to recreate that magic. So what does he do? Jake Peete, we've talked about. Guess who he's tied to? Joe Brady. Joe Brady obviously left to become the offensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers. But Durante Jones, who you mentioned on the defensive side, he has ties to Dave Aranda while they were at Wisconsin prior to getting back into the NFL. Dave Aranda, of course, was the defensive coordinator of that 2019 team. So chemistry, bringing back some of that magic, and familiarity through scheme, I think was really important to Ed Orgeron.
Johnson in trouble, tucks and runs again. Got inside the 5. It'll bring up a 4th and goal.
These are those moments, Jay, that for spring football, you get in situations where you want to see what your quarterback does. Okay, well, now you're in the red area, you're plus territory. What do you have to do? You got to be smart with the football. You can't make errors. You can't throw the ball up for grabs. And I mentioned Max Johnson in his 2 starts, 8 touchdowns, just 1 interception. He hasn't liked what he's seen on the previous 2 plays, so what does he do? Tucks it, runs, lives to play the next down. Now they're on the 6-yard line with another opportunity in 4th and 3.
And Ed Orgeron wants his defense to try and get off the field here without giving up any points. First team offense against first team defense. First big test on 4th down, and the defense wins it. Great play. Dwight McGlockern, the sophomore corner, getting his hands in there. So defense wins round 1. We get back out onto the field. The LSU spring game continues. Preview of a new-look Tigers when we come back. After the first-team defense gets the better of the first-team offense, we've now got the second-team offense on the field. This is TJ Finley. Finley actually started most games of any quarterback last season. Started 5 games for LSU, went 2-3. What are the strengths of TJ Finley, Tom?
Arm talent. I mean, he is a big, you see the measurables right there, 6'6", 242 pounds. Really, really powerful arm. Can make all the throws on the field. Probably the best vertical passer just because of sheer arm talent out of the 4 quarterbacks, and getting the number 2 slot today. Again, still competing. Nope, no decisions been made. A great strike over the middle there.
Yeah, first pass is a really good one. It's Jontre Kirkland for the first down.
See TJ get back, get set, knows where he's at, see his eyes. Good feel and timing. I think that's the one thing, and that's just, 2 throws right there for TJ Finley. We saw Max Johnson on the previous drive. Quarterbacks aren't holding on to the ball. They're going through their progression. They're getting the ball out, helping their offensive line. The timing and rhythm of this offense is really important. I think it was something that was lacking in last year's offense.
Handoff goes to Nick Demas. We told you that the running back room is pretty light between the freshmen not showing up till June, then some injuries, really thin. This is Nick Demas. He's actually a linebacker who converted to running back just so they could have somebody on the second unit. That running back room will be immensely talented once they get everybody in it, but right now it's Tyron Davis-Price sitting by himself. 2nd and 6 for Finley. Clean pocket, but bat down. Tom, I'm curious. The old adage is when you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. Well, LSU's got 4 quarterbacks, so what does that mean?
Well, it means that at some point they're going to have a problem. But until they have a problem, don't worry about it. Because right now they've got 4 guys that are willing to compete, that are battling, that are high-aptitude kids that all were willing to battle for a job that is wide open. There's nobody that's really taken the reins and walked away with this thing, but they've got experience across the board. Now, at some point or another, as we all know, there's only one ball. Transfer portal will come into play, but don't worry about that until you have to worry about that.
3rd and 6 for Finley. Steps up. Pass is incomplete. You know, it's interesting because I think in the age of the transfer portal, a lot of kids wouldn't even want to stay and compete. They may think, okay, Max Johnson won the last 2 games of last season. He'll probably get the job. Or Myles Brennan will come back healthy. He'll get the job. Why does a kid like TJ Finley stay and compete?
Because I think it would be different if Myles Brennan had not gotten hurt, had continued to further advance his career because he had gotten off to a great start, 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. But that didn't happen. So everybody got a little sample size, and so it encouraged all these guys to say, you know what, this is wide open. We're coming back, and we're going to compete for LSU.
We get another look at Max Johnson as these 4 LSU quarterbacks all are competing for the starting job this spring. Ed Orgeron said this one's going to go down to the wire. They'll compete all spring, they'll compete all fall, and then we'll make a decision. Johnson getting the first snaps with the first team. Plenty of room to run here. Tyron Davis-Price with a burst of speed. Past the 50.
You know, Jay, this is an area that I think LSU knows that they have got to take the next step. They want to run the football. If you're going to be coached by Ed Orgeron, you're going to have a physical nature at the point of attack. They have not been able, whether it is Davis-Price, whether it's been John Emery, both highly touted coming out, nobody's really kind of taken the reins and just run away with being the bell cow at running back. I think to some degree you might think that they underwhelmed a year ago at the running back position. This is an area, like I said with the wide receivers, that really needs to upgrade its production.
Johnson throwing on first down, incomplete. Taking a closer look at Max Johnson, he comes from a football pedigree. His father, for that, 15 years in the NFL, won a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. His uncle is Mark Richt. Max grew up in Athens. You know, he's got his uncle coaching the Dogs for most of his childhood. This is a kid that eats, sleeps, and breathes football.
Yeah, and his dad, Brad, was able to coach him as well. So, you know, he's coming from a really, really strong pedigree. You know, in our quarterback conversation we were having with these 4 terrific options, we got to remember, too, you still got the 4-game redshirt rule. You also have an extra year of eligibility that's been afforded to everybody. So these quarterbacks, while they're competing, they also need to consider the long game. And there's a lot of football to be played for them, whether it's at LSU or somewhere else. But you mentioned how Coach said this thing's going to go down to the wire, and I think it is. But they're probably going to get to some point in the summer where one of the quarterbacks starts to see the writing on the wall, and maybe that quarterback isn't with them in August. I hope that's not the case, but you're going to come out of spring, and there's going to be some form of a pecking order, I think. And, you know, we've already seen TJ Finley a little bit. We'll see Myles Brennan, who started off last year before being lost to a season-ending injury, and then Garrett Nussmeier, the exciting freshman who Jake Pete's the offensive coordinator, Jay, as well as Ed Orgeron. They had just nothing but glowing remarks about the young freshman and his ability to adapt quickly to major college football.
Johnson converts the 3rd and 3 to get a fresh set of downs here. You know, when we were asking Ed Orgeron about each quarterback that he's got of the 4, he just loved Johnson's preparation, his competitiveness, and you know, loved the way that he rallied the team. He got thrust into a pretty difficult situation last fall. As a true freshman, they're 3-5, and he gets his first career start down in the swamp. They're 27-point underdogs, and he comes out and wins that game.
Yeah, and the game wasn't too big for him, Jay. I mean, I think that's the thing as a freshman, you get in that environment, what do? And you can tell by their body language, you can tell by their performance. This guy just kind of has it. And Coach mentioned that competitive temperament. He actually said that on all 4. He said that's the one thing I love about these kids is they're battling. They all decided to come back. They knew once they got into that room that the job's up for grabs and that nothing's going to be given to anybody. So they went to work. And if your best players are your best leaders, are your best workers, you got the makings of something special. I think that's what makes this quarterback room really intriguing and potentially a special one for this LSU staff.
You called it the best quarterback room in college football, potentially, and offensive coordinator Jake Peetz agreed with you. In his first year, he comes in from the NFL, took a look at all four of these guys and said, you know what? All four of these guys are NFL caliber quarterbacks one day. That's high praise coming from a guy who just came from Carolina, worked with Joe Brady, to say all four are capable of getting snaps one day in the National Football League.
Yeah, and I think he saw not only physical attributes, but he saw the makeup and what it takes to potentially be a guy like that one day, because it's not all just physical tools. It's some of the other intangible traits, and in fact, it often can be difficult to identify until you start working one-on-one and face-to-face with these young kids. So it's been a short sample size and a small one right now for Jake Peetz that will continue to grow and enhance over the next coming months leading into the fall.
On 3rd and 16, Johnson off his back foot lets it fly out of bounds. Great pressure from B.J. Ojulari. He's a sophomore defensive end out of Marietta, Georgia, that this LSU team is really high on.
He's going to be special, Jay. He's got an opportunity to be a difference maker. One of those guys that is just so disruptive. You've got to account for him off the edge. I mean, that's the one thing. We talk about, building championship football teams. Well, where do you do that? You do that from the inside out. LSU's got their entire offensive front back, the bulk of their entire front seven on defense, particularly the front four, all back. All right, and a little bit of a revamped secondary that features really good players that might have been off a year ago, but they can play. So there's a lot of excitement with this roster when you look at the returning players.
We've talked a lot about the quarterbacks. LSU's got a really good kicker, too. The junior, Cade York, drills a 50-yarder to open the score. LSU should hear Jamar Chase's name picked in the top 10. So we want to get back to Baton Rouge.
So fun, Jay, for me in particular, and what we do and the coverage of recruiting, when you start to identify and see these kids when they're 14, 15 years old. And, a guy like Jamar Chase play with us in the Under Armour All-America game, and then you watch him move on and matriculate through the college and hopefully one day the professional ranks. And it's just so fun to see the growth of these kids, and it's pretty amazing in today's day and age how so many of these kids just make the leap effortlessly. It's not easy to do. It takes special talents.
Who's the next big prospect, I guess, on this current LSU team that we'll probably hear their name called a year from now?
Oh, man, that is a really, really good question. I would probably say if he gets back to his true freshman form, it's Derek Stingley. Because from a physical attribute standpoint, when he really wants to turn it on, there's nobody better in college football. I think he had a bit of a drop. I don't think he had a lot of fun last year. And I think it affected his psyche. It affected his concentration on worrying about what he could control, what he couldn't, and being his best. So I think he needs to have a rebound year. If he does, he's without question probably the top corner, at least at this early stage when you say come off the board or being evaluated for guys like Todd and Mel when it comes to next spring. And then Eli Ricks, who we won't see today, that will be back in the mix, will play opposite of him on the perimeter. And a couple of shifts in the defensive secondary as you see these two guys. Jay Ward moves inside to safety after playing corner. Now you've got a cover corner safety guy on your inside, two perimeter guys on the outside, so they can essentially be in nickel and dime almost all the time and never have to substitute for it on defense. So we know how talented LSU's been on defense in years past, and those perimeter guys should be really good again in 2021.
Stingley was one of only two starters back last year from LSU's national championship team. 19 of the 21 starters not on the roster in 2020, whether it was opt-outs, leaving early from the draft, graduation, and understandably that led to the growing pains. A 3-5 start for